Innovation is in our veins. Soon the whole world will know our names. Sharing our knowledge and freedom reign. We here for the people, you know it's our way. Setting foundations is part of the dream. It doesn't matter if you're new to the game. Listen up now, cause we all gon' say, elevate, 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 higher, elevate, 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 higher. We gon' rise up, we all gon' shine. Work through adversity, stay on the grind. Elevate, elevate, this is our time. Elevate, elevate.
Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, everyone. It's so great to have you all on one more time. It's your boy Josh.
And Reg.
And we're grateful to be back going with you yet again. It's been a wild week. A little bit hard on the head. We're going to get into all of it. Apparently, if you didn't know any better, apparently we have a new white supremacist group who's just taken over the country based on what the Liberals have been saying and Action Online, which I thought was interesting. So we'll be talking about Poilievre and Diagolon and all that jazz. Secondly, we'll be talking about how Trudeau looked dead in the camera and said, Premier Moe, CRA is coming for you. We're going to get our carbon taxes. Sorry, I mean, the CRA is a separate entity from the government, but they're coming after you. Good luck. Then as well, we'll be talking about how that Loblaw boycott is going to be starting this week. And last but not least, well, Reg brought it up on the show last week. He said, well, there's a situation that happened with all these bylaws and red tape, people building on land and siphoning off acres and this, that, the other. And well, we got that story about 90% correct. We'll be having it on the crew and the husband and wife team that is happening to here in Halifax, what's been happening, how their fight has been like with the city. And we'll be having them on for our last 15 minutes of the show. We're looking forward to it. Reg, how you feeling, big dog?
I'm feeling great, honestly, and I think I attributed a lot to some of the viewers. I had a couple of people actually reach out to me on various platforms and just like send well wishes to my personal accounts, which are all separate from the Elevate podcast account. And so they just like found me because Reg Manzer's not a common name. It's pretty unique. Anyway, just sending me love and saying like, keep doing what you're doing. We love what you have to say. We love your take. Thank you for doing the research and the hard work behind the scenes. And it just was like very life-giving. And I was like, thank you so much for saying that. So really appreciate it. And those listeners, there was 3 in the past week that did that. So thank you to you folks for doing that. You know who you are. So really feeling the love. So I'm feeling good.
Nice.
How you doing?
I'm doing fairly well. Been fun to watch sports the past week. That's been interesting. Seeing the meltdown on social media happen with Leaf fans across North America. It's been real interesting to watch. And I can't complain, dude. Life's pretty good over here, except for, we'll have to get into it. But man, last week was hard on the head, admittedly.
Yeah, well, to talk about the Leafs for a hot second there, I was coming from a birthday party and then went to go see the Leafs game with a couple friends at Boston Pizza. And everybody in there was like Leafs, except for like the 3 or 4 Boston fans. And that was a sad place. When we were leaving, there was lots of booze being ordered because people were trying to drown their sorrows. I was like, come on, guys. Like, this is no difference. This is every year for you guys. So anyway, I was not cheering for the Leafs, but I was not cheering for the Boston, especially because Boston and Vancouver had a little thing, a little while back, and Vancouverites burnt down half the city in response to it. So anyway, ever since then, I've been less of a Boston fan than I have of the Leafs. So
you became less of a Boston fan because Vancouver burnt down their own city?
No, because the stupid call that was made by the ref in that game that actually cost them the game, cost them the cup.
Wow.
Anyway, so that was dumb.
All right.
We're not getting into that.
Settle down. This guy's still reaching back to 2011. 13 years ago. It's back. Yeah. Back. Sorry. I'm like flustered now about this.
Sports. What? Ugh.
Yeah. Freaking sports. Yeah. That's the thing. Leaf fans are probably the worst fan base in all sports. They're right up there with the Cowboys. In football, they really do just believe the craziest things. That they really believe that their team's going to win it every year, and they're disappointed every year in tremendous fashion, may I add. And so it is really interesting that the fact that this fan base is such a joke because they're so mad, like, oh, these guys don't try hard in the playoffs, this, that, and that. You keep going to the games. You keep selling out, no matter how bad they get or how they don't live up to expectations. That happens to any other sports franchise in the country or in the States. They lose ticket sales until they put a product out that people actually want to watch and are excited to get behind.
But okay, I'll give you this. The Leafs do this every year, though, where they are excellent when they're not in the playoffs. And they were killing it this year. And then as soon as they get into playoffs, they fall apart. They fall like a wet cardboard box, I'd say. Like, that's every year for them. And so I can get it where people are like hopeful because they see them playing and they're like, okay, we're doing really well in the off season. We're doing really well, not in playoffs. And then we get into playoffs and then fold. So
you sound like a Liberal supporter. Like, I just don't get it. It's been 8 years of the same thing year after year. I don't care about this hope. It gets to a point where if you're a hockey fan, you're just like, yeah, I don't really care about the regular season. We know what's going to happen. Playoff time is when it matters. And they just disappear.
I know.
Gone. So I don't really give it to any Leaf fans. They're like, oh, I had hope. And like, it's been 8 years of the same thing year after year. And you think it's going to get better. It only keeps getting worse. Here we are.
Matthews even left. He didn't even stay for the whole game.
Yeah, he left the chat.
Yeah.
He was out. He was
like,
gone.
I have a headache. Don't talk to me.
That was Nylander.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
He had the migraine apparently.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. We're getting into toxic hockey culture now. You guys are making jokes about people's sickness and they don't. Yeah, we are. You're getting paid millions of dollars. Suck it up. So your team is needing a win in the playoffs, and the guys are just out. They're just out. There's guys when you find it's my favorite part of at the end of every NHL playoff run, a team that wins, you see the list of injuries that come out. So I don't really care. Matthews this, Nylander that. Matthew Tkachuk, leader of the Florida Panthers last year, played with a broken sternum. So don't give me this trash. Everyone's fighting through crap. Everyone's battling and nagging injuries. It's just part of being a professional athlete, a part of the job. I don't care. Mm-hmm. And the fan base doesn't care. I'm not even a Leaf fan. I'm loving this right now. I'm enjoying the misery that it is to see Leaf fans cry over and over and over again. It's not unsimilar to what I do simply enjoy watching people on the left melt down in general. The only reason I don't get to laugh at that is because their misery is also my misery as well. Like, whatever has happened on their ends, like, it's going to affect me as a person. So, like, it's not as fun. Leaf fans, them losing all the time, doesn't affect me much. It's hilarious to watch. So.
And we instantly lose like 5% of our subscriber base right there.
You know what? Good.
But actually, kind of that segue, though, into those individuals who are supporting the left. Man, I did a deep dive into this stupid Diagolon thing, and it's just like,
you did not.
I did, and it hurts my brain.
Man.
I was just like, why?
Right
why
on,
is this
soldier.
a thing?
Right on, soldier. Yeah, so let's just paint. We all know what we're talking about, but let's paint the picture here. So last week, Poilievre was kind of doing his circuit around Atlantic Canada, hit PEI, hit New Glasgow, was driving back through the Nova Scotia-New Brunswick border and saw the encampment of the protesters who are protesting the carbon tax on the side of the highway. He's like, you know what? Let's stop by and say hi to these homies, see what they're all about. And they kind of talked to him. He talked with them back. He's like, I support your message. This carbon tax is BS. Trudeau is BS, blah, 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 blah. They show him their trailer. They show him the cart they're sleeping in. Shows all, and he's like, okay, cool, whatever. And he's going through, and then this is all being like essentially videotaped throughout the whole time. But there was one time he's stepping out of this trailer, and this trailer door swung right open. There's a heart. There's a peace sign. There's also in the bottom right corner this black flag with a white diagonal through it, done up in Sharpie. And if the left didn't take that and run with it, I don't know what it looked like, but that's what it was. It was the Diagolon flag, which, again, we on the show have heard of Diagolon. We never pay much attention because there's like 20 of them in the whole country. And then as well, I actually didn't know they had a flag. That was news to me. Yeah. That's what I learned through this whole thing. And he's like, he's associating with white supremacists. All right. And then started having this whole meltdown on social media. And we got somehow, some way, got caught up in the crossfire of all this because of your boy right here going off about the Hallentine protests over in Ottawa last week. And I actually can't say the word now because we just learned this past week that YouTube will censor us if we even so much as broach that topic. So we'll address that at a different time. But I was going off about the communist flags, this, that, the other, and everyone started comparing me going off about this in Ottawa to a Sharpie Diagolon flag on the trailer in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. And Pierre Poilievre happened to walk by it. And they're associating Poilievre associated with right-wing supremacy. And wild. And the tweets didn't end. And I was simply shocked by the fact that people even came at us saying, how are you like disavowing this, but you're not disavowing that? And I'm like, because Poilievre isn't, literally, he walked by something. That's all it was. And like us, we're in politics. We see the political world. Even we didn't realize there was a flag for this group because they're so insignificant in Canada. The RCMP, even in their little report, said Diagolon is not a viable threat to Canada. But do you know what is a viable threat? The fact that people keep being more and more broke by these government policies, and eruptions of vigor and anger are going to erupt in this country. That's a real threat. This isn't real. So this is kind of what has happened here in the past week, and watching Twitter erupt over it was wild.
Yeah, and I had to laugh because like I had to figure out like what is the story behind the flag? What is the story behind like even the name and all this stuff? And so the idea is that they're like a group of basically like a Dal Dentistry type like Facebook group kind of thing. Yeah. Like nobody's labeled the Dal Dentistry Facebook group as a terrorist group. Like, let's be real. This is the equivalency we're talking about here. And they were like, oh yeah, if you just drew a diagonal line between Alaska and Florida, then that's where all the smart people are that really care about their countries and blah, 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 blah. And so, you know, you're hitting Alberta and then the Midwest and in the States. And so they were like really high on themselves with this. And they're all like, yeah, rah, rah, rah. A bunch of them went hunting together. Like it was a whole thing. And they made this stupid flag as a meme, as a joke for their group. And it blew up. Like people, anyway, I just thought it was hilarious because it was like, really, like your diagonal line of like important, smart people includes Florida man? Like, really? Anyway, I just thought it was hilarious. And I'm like, why is there so much attention to this? Like Trudeau got on the air and was just like, he was being asked a question about somebody with an F Trudeau hat or flag or some paraphernalia that said F Trudeau on it. And apparently a member of the RCMP let that person know which door that Trudeau went into. And the reporter was like, are you investigating that? Are you looking into that? Is that, you know, a breach of service because this serviceman had directed this, obviously a protester, you know, to where you were? And he's like, in Canada, I really value the fact that we can protest. I'm like, oh, do ya? That's interesting. That's a new take for you. And he's like, but you know what I don't like? I don't like Pierre Poilievre and his support of white supremacists like Diagolon. And I'm like, what? And he's like, and Alex Jones. He's like, he needs to denounce them. And I'm like, he needs to not give them the time of day because they don't deserve it.
Yep.
Like, just ridiculous. And so they're creating this false enemy out there that we need to band together and fight against. And it just screams of desperation of a group that's like, we can't demonize the provinces. We can't demonize Pierre. We can't demonize the people. So we're going to create some entity out of like I said, the equivalent of a Facebook group and make that the enemy. The problem is, this is where I'm like, is it going to start creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where you have these people who are then like, yeah, I hate the government too. Maybe I should get in with these Diagolon guys. And like, that's where I'm wondering, like, are they actually just fueling it on purpose to make it bigger than what it is so they have a false enemy to be against? Like, that's why I'm wondering if it's getting so much attention. I'm wondering if it's actually a political tool.
Oh, that's
because
100%.
It's just, it's stupid otherwise.
It is really stupid. And I would agree. It is a political tool. It is a strategy at this point. And it just like as it's a strategy for Poilievre to not give it the time of day. It's a distraction. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help with his messaging. It doesn't help with what the focus is about Canada. So it's just purely a distraction. And I think it's brilliant on Poilievre's part to not even entertain it. Because anyone who looks at those videos knows exactly what was going on. But that's the issue with politics is people headline read. They just see a screenshot. They see Poilievre's face next to some random Sharpie flag on a trailer. And then they make that connection. Yeah. And that's kind of what I think is an issue for them to battle. But I think it's really wise of Poilievre to not entertain it and not give it the time of day, because then they start getting the sound bites from there. And then they can keep pushing that narrative. And we look at, these are some tweets that came out. Larry Dowell, shout out Cowling 175, says PP will not denounce Diagolon or Jones in the House of Commons. He was asked to do so and did not. Now you know he's a Nazi.
You mean like the guy that you guys invited in and everybody gave a standing ovation to?
Oh, yeah, that guy. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Pierre Poilievre just ended his career. Why do polls say Canadians support this guy? Have we become a nation of assholes? We love Dean Blundell. Says PP was hammered. Also not the place to find an extra toothbrush. You know, it just Fred Hickey. One day Pierre Poilievre meets with white supremacists. Next day he meets with Jewish people. Next day white supremacists. Day after meets with Sikhs. WTF.
So here's my thought on this too. Like two thoughts there. One, I hate the left doing that weird PP thing, like trying to like basically equate his name to genitalia. It's like, are you 5? Like True. You, the egalitarian left, like, you know, literally making PP jokes. Like, give me a break. Like, you know that if they did that about Trudeau in some way, like if there was some way to do that, and they did that and equated his name to genitalia, they'd be like, this is the mentality of the right. They're so dumb. They have to make a, you know, genital joke. Like, hate it. Hate that so much. The other thing is that, yeah, so if he met with people who are on the far right, he met with Sikhs, he met with other individuals of whatever political stripe, that's because they're all Canadians. And whether you like it or not, those people on the far right, those people in the mid-right, those people who are right of center, they're all Canadians too. They're your community members. They're your people that are in your neighborhood, and you have to learn to live with them and like them because they are your family. They are Canadians. So they vote. They have the right to vote. So yeah, he should meet with them because they are voters, and he has to represent their ideology in the House of Commons as well. Maybe not to the degree that they're hoping for, but he still has to represent them because they're Canadians. So screw off. He has to meet with everyone because he represents everyone.
Okay, so let's pull us back a little bit. I have a question for you on that.
Go for it.
So using that argument, and this is the argument that people, I don't agree with the argument that I'm about to share, but this is the connection people made, is what is the difference between these quote unquote extreme right people over here, these extremists that Poilievre met with, quote unquote, and the Palestine supporters who were advocating for the death of a group of people on Parliament Hill. Do you see that the same way? Do you think Trudeau should meet with those people and hear out their issues?
Yeah, because if they're protesting in front of the House of Commons, 100%. He doesn't have to agree with them, just the same way as Pierre doesn't have to agree with the far right people. But you still have to meet with them if they're out there protesting, demanding an audience with your government, and it's a significant group of people like it is, then yeah, you need to address it. The fact that you can run and hide behind a tweet to try and be like, oh, I don't like this, like, you know, he did, and Freeland did as well. No, I don't like that. Mm-hmm. Actually address it. You're the leader of the country. You have civil unrest in your country right now. Address it. Don't run away like you did in the convoy. Don't run away from this. Like, these are the things that you signed up for when you signed up to be leader. Lead. Mm-hmm. And that's my opinion.
Gotcha. And I do want to kind of bring it back to your, because what happened in the House of Commons today was very interesting. It's only a 2-minute clip, but I think I'll be curious your perspective on this.
Mr. Speaker, last week we saw the leader of the opposition once again visit with supporters of white supremacy, anarchy, and misogyny. This has been a regular occurrence. He draws the admiration of people who dismiss the slaughter of children in schools. The leader of the opposition now has 30 seconds to speak to this House and to Canadians once I sit down. I ask him to clearly disavow the views of these dangerous people. Will he do that?
That isn't...
Order.
Oh, standing ovation for Steve. Love it.
Yeah. We're here for it. Yeah. Listen to this.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I unequivocally disavow the guy who spent the first half of his adult life as a practicing racist, dressing up in blackface. He's accepted the support of Hamas, and now he's brought on the extremist and radical position of allowing legal drug use in playgrounds, in hospitals, in coffee shops that has led to the mass death of our people. Will he not refuse the demand of Toronto to replicate the decriminalization nightmare?
Okay. This embodies everything I hate about my experience
At QP.
at QP.
Okay, hit me.
Because one guy says something that's totally garbage. The next guy gets up, doesn't address it at all, throws something else out there. So they're just flinging mud at each other. Nothing's actually being said. There's no conversation happening. There's nothing intelligent even happening there. It's just like, who can dunk on the guy the most? Like, it just, like, it's funny for the moment, and it's really disheartening for the fact that this is our country.
True. Yeah, I mean, we're part of the problem. I mean, this is why they do it, right? Is so guys like us cover it and put it on TikTok. But coming back to political strategy for a second here, I did find it interesting that the fact that he kind of had that Conor McGregor moment.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I apologize to absolutely nobody.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of what that moment was. It was like, yeah, I, disavow what that man across has done, and then ignored the question altogether, which for this particular case, I think was a good strategy on his part.
I agree. I do agree. When you're thrown a stupid question, you're going to get a stupid answer. So, that's how I view this. But I'm disappointed in those elected officials that was the stupid question that they tried to lob out there as a dunk. Yeah. And that's what these are. It's just like, I'm gonna dunk on this guy.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, I do like his response back. And I do think that he was very politically savvy in the sense of not giving those comments the time of day and throwing it right back.
And that is the issue that conservatives have had a problem with forever.
Oh, yeah.
They've always bent the knee and cowered in fear anytime an accusation like that's thrown at them. So it's nice to see a conservative party actually have some backbone finally and say, that doesn't work anymore. We're done with the mudslinging in terms of like the constant name throwing you give to us when you don't like what we have to say and what our ideas are. And we usually cower in fear and then kind of bow to you. And that was always the joke, was conservatives are liberals going the speed limit. And that's how the liberals would control the opposition in a lot of ways, is with these types of accusations. So it's nice to see them say, we're done with that. It's over. But
yeah,
you got something to say before we move on?
Oh, I'm saying it's so polarizing, right? It's just, it's frustrating. Yeah. And nothing is actually being accomplished here. And we see that.
Yep.
And so this is what I think is like happening, where Canadians are almost in like that state of despair, because it's like, okay, cool, that happened, but nothing is actually moving forward in a way that's benefiting Canadians from this. We're paying for it.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
So
absolutely. I know you did a lot of research on like political divide. Did you want to get into that, or do you want to move on to this CRA stuff?
I'll jump into it real quick. Okay. So basically what I found was, when we talk about political divide, I found that there's 7 precipitating factors for political polarization. And so they're going to be no surprise to anyone. But the first one, economic inequality. As you increase economic inequality, you increase polarity in the country. And so when they look at studies by the Parliamentary Budget Officer, finding that housing affordability is deteriorated, that it's outpacing income growth, that 56% of Canadians are experiencing financial stress due to inflation, and that the carbon tax is a key factor in that inflation. And then they're finding that cultural and social shifts at an increased rate is actually causing polarization. So the fact that like when you get big changes, like all the stuff that's happening with the trans stuff, all the stuff that's happening around climate change, they're forcing it at such a speed that people can't absorb it. And then that's creating polarization. So instead of like easing into political issues, because you have to realize you had like the George Floyd, like racial issues, then you had all the Indigenous graves that were found. And then you had, like I said, the trans stuff that came out, and like more push from the LGBTQ plus community. And then also climate change just like layered on all top of this. That's too many social issues for a country to handle at one time, and they're all going at light speed. And so you have to like limit the amount of social unrest so that people don't feel like their traditional values are just being completely eroded and deteriorated in front of them. You have to stretch that over generations for it to be successful. Because what happens is you have like right now where they're like, oh yeah, these people are white supremacists. It's like, maybe these people are responding to too much social change all at once. And whether you're in one of those groups or not, like, I know that your priority is to have your social change happen, but I think it's really kind of working against you when there's so many things happening at the same time. Social media and digitization causing echo chambers. Like, it's just kind of an obvious one. When you enter social media and the algorithm rewards you with more things that they know that you'll like, and that just keep that confirmation bias going, because they know they can sell more ads that way. Like, they're a business. They're in it to just get you on that, keep you looking at it as long as possible, and just pound you with ads. They don't want you to see a viewpoint that you don't agree with and then turn off your phone. Right. So it's creating that polarization because people are not being exposed to different viewpoints. They're just seeing their own. The decline of trust in institutions, partisan media, which is a big one. Globalization and the declining national identity. That one was really cool to look into. And then the political strategies of using polarization as a wedge, which is they actually have data showing that in the past 8 years that's become more and more and more of a political tool. But that globalization and declining national identity and then decline of trust in institutions, I thought was really, really interesting because there's a couple different organizations. Angus Reid did a whole bunch of polls. There's another one called the Endelman Trust Barometer. And so they actually look at like the level of trust that Canadians have in their government, in their universities, in the media, and just trust is falling off a cliff. And they showed that actually 52% of Canadians actually trust the government right now. That's just over half. That's dismal, like abysmal. Like, that's just awful. And so the other thing that I thought was interesting was that NGOs, they don't do much better. They only have 58% of the Canadians actually supporting them and trusting in them. But business, though, business had 62% of Canadians support business and trust business, which is kind of a little bit of a mind shift for me because I always thought that people would be like, oh, business bad, the government's good, the government's here to help you. Whereas I think that more people these days are actually leaning towards like business is going to business. They're going to do what they're going to do. They're there to make money, and government should be holding them to account with good regulation. And they're not. They're actually passing them money in behind the closed doors. And so I think that's what's happening, where they're like, we know businesses. They're sometimes they're the devil, and sometimes they're good actors. It's just whatever. They're there to make money. Whereas the government is supposed to be there to have your back, and they're not. And so that's declining trust. But yeah, all these factors that lead up to political polarization, 7 factors, really, really, really cool. And we have the data to actually show exactly where trust has been eroded and how much. And it lines up surprisingly well with this leader, which is not good for Mr. Trudeau. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was, I think some things you brought up there too, with like using polarization as a political tool, like that's been his MO since the beginning. Yeah. And to see kind of the chaos that's ensued since has not been by accident. So I think those are all very good points.
Yeah, the one I forgot to mention that I thought was really interesting was under that factor of globalization and declining national identity, they bring up the idea of immigration. And so immigration being a big factor. And so under Trudeau's tenure of being prime minister, he's brought in 2.7 million immigrants. That's more than all of the Atlantic Canadians combined. That's like dropping New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland's population. More than that, because their population together equals about 2.5 million. So an extra 200,000 on top of that dumped on Canada in 8 years. That's insane. That's nuts.
And people wonder why the infrastructure hasn't kept up.
Yeah.
Amazing how that works.
Yeah. Crazy. But one thing that will keep up with them, the CRA.
Yep. We'll make sure that they'll hold their own there. But yeah, when it comes to polarization, the provinces are trying to speak up. And Premier Moe from Saskatchewan has been very vocal and the leader in a lot of those conversations. And he was very clear that Saskatchewan wasn't going to be collecting or giving any carbon tax money over to the federal government. He said, this is a stupid policy. It's unconstitutional. We're not doing it. And well, Trudeau is starting to put the pressure on him. And this is what he had to say about that today.
We're going to continue to deliver the Canada Carbon Rebate to families right across Saskatchewan, despite the fact that Premier Moe is not sending that money to Ottawa right now. Canada Revenue Agency has ways of ensuring that money that is owed to them is eventually collected, and we have faith in the rigorous, quasi-judicial proceedings that the Canada Revenue Agency uses. I don't know about you, but having an argument with CRA about not wanting to pay your taxes is not a position I want anyone to be in. Good luck with that, Premier Moe.
Ridiculous. And I love how smug everyone is. They're like, we're going to send the CRA after you, which is supposed to be a nonpartisan entity, by the way.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be at the beck and call of the Prime Minister. But love that he's trying to use a corporate entity, a crown entity as a threat.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we're seeing, not just in Canada, but we're seeing that across a lot of these governments across the world, where they're starting to weaponize
taxation,
but as well as other entities that are supposed to be separate from the government arm to go against their political opponents, to go after those who don't agree with them, like we've seen with the DOJ in the States, the FBI and the CIA being weaponized by Joe Biden to go after Donald Trump. This is starting to become a normal thing to do in Western politics at this point, and I hate that it's being normalized. And this is Trudeau doing the Canadian version of that. The CRA is going to come for you. And CRA, this is a CTV news article coming out of Regina. It's the CRA to audit Saskatchewan for not paying carbon levies on home heating. Moe said the agency has indicated it will look at Saskatchewan's books to see how much the province owes in levies that weren't paid to Ottawa. They will ask if they can look at the submissions we've made and for us to submit money they estimate we may be owed, he told reporters. And we don't believe there's any dollars that are owed. The Saskatchewan Party government decided earlier this year to not remit the federal carbon price on natural gas, a move that breaks federal law. Moe invoked the measure after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau exempted users of home heating oil from having to pay levy, and move largely seen as a politically motivated boost Liberal support in Atlantic Canada.
Yeah. See, this is the problem, though, is that we exist in a federal system where the provinces under Section 91 and 92 of the Constitution Act, they have jurisdiction over certain things, and then the federal government has jurisdiction over certain things. One's not subservient to the other. They're not supposed to be, the overlord that is now shaking down the provinces for money. Like, that's not how this was envisioned. And they weren't supposed to be, the grand poobah of Canada. So this is going to be really interesting to see how this hits the courts, because under our Constitution, they should have equal footing here. So I don't know how they're going to do that. I don't know if they're going to try and put it under national defense and security, because they're trying to claim that the climate crisis is now an issue of national defense. And that would be a stretch on a good day, but I think that's probably how they're going to try and do this, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, that will be the play, and there's been many articles that have come out talking about how that is kind of the play in general that is being made to do. So that they can legitimize potential climate lockdowns, to minimize the amount of greenhouse gases that are being emitted by people driving. That has already been kind of being pushed to kind of make this a national defense issue, so that they can make those things a reality.
Yeah, which is interesting, because I know we've talked about this before, about the electric cars and being able to turn them off remotely, and it sounds like a dystopian future, honestly. And it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but the fact that it's possible is what worries me. It's I don't even want the possibility, even if it's a 1 in a million chance that this is going to be something that's weaponized and used. We've seen too many unprecedented actions lately that I do not want to even enter the realm of that kind of possibility. But That's where I kind of see it. And even when you think about the current lockdowns that we experienced through COVID, there were still some people that were exempt from different things. If they had business that they had to attend to, they could fly, they could go wherever, they could travel in between provinces. And it's funny how that coincides with the rich and powerful. You know, they're important enough that they get special treatment. And so I see the same thing happening if they try and do any kind of climate lockdown or any kind of climate actions where you can't take so many flights in a year and you have so many carbon credits or whatever they decide to do. I totally see the rich and powerful just being like, that's cool. That doesn't apply to me.
Yeah. And it's these types of issues where people have had really huge problems with us and with this show, and why they think we've gone so far right is because we are talking about things that people legitimately can't believe that are actually real and could actually happen. And we're just simply talking about it only because we've seen the trend that's happened over the past 4 years. And we're like, it could happen. This is a legitimate thing that's being discussed. So don't call us crazy. We're just putting it out. It could happen.
Well, there was legislation actually put out, I think it was in the States, about having the ability to turn off electric vehicles.
By 2035.
Yes. Yep. That's a real piece of legislation that you can go find and look up. And as soon as I saw that, I went, yikes. Like, actually, yikes. So it's out there. And then if you've watched Upload on Amazon, it's hilarious. I love that show. And one of the things that happens is that he's fighting a corporate entity with his product, and they basically hijack the systems in his car, the autopilot in his car, and kill him.
Yeah.
And it's actually comedy, but, and I'm not giving too much away because it all happens in the first episode, but that's what I look at. I'm like, oh crap, that's the future we could get to. And that to me worries me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And coming back down to the CRA being weaponized and threatened with Premier Moe, and the fact that conversations are already happening where the CRA has already come knocking saying, hey, we want to look at these books, see what you owe. And he says, we don't owe anything from as far as we're concerned. As you said, this is clearly going to go to the courts. This will be dragged out. And I'm curious, even if some way the laws favor Trudeau and the federal government on this one, I think Moe is going to try and drag this out to 2025.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, this will go to the courts, and this will be such a long process that Poilievre will get in, and then it won't be an issue anyway.
True.
But it will be interesting to see that. And it's funny because I actually had a couple locker room conversations with some people who have close ties to the CRA, and they might not themselves work, but have, family members or friends or close contacts in the CRA, talking about how they're incentivized to actually go after individuals and go after small businesses and go after those folks who may not have proper legal counsel, who may just not have the records kept, who may have filed everything correctly, but can't produce records from 6 years ago. And they're incentivized and paid bonuses to go after these folks and bring CRA money. It's like, that's so wrong. It's so dirty, paying people, incentivizing people with money to go find money from others. Like, it just, ugh.
Yeah,
gross.
I was talking to some business leaders about the CRA and kind of what's been happening to a wide variety of different business leaders and business owners I've been chatting with, and how the CRA just randomly comes knocking, like, hey, we saw this, and this, we want X amount of money, and there's like, what? And I was having this conversation. I thought it was really interesting because the way this conversation went was like, you don't mess with the IRS, they will put you in prison. But the CRA, in comparison to the IRS, is a joke. And I'm like, talk to me. There's like, we have a connection who operated an unregistered business for 7 years, didn't report any money on taxes. CRA finally came calling, like, hey, you have an unregistered business, you owe X amount of money. He was like, guys, we know I don't have that money, so how about I pay you X, call it a day? And they're like, sure, close the case.
No way.
Yeah. Like, that's, like, this guy was like, and we're talking like high six figures of money that this man owed. And he said, how about I just give you this? And it was, let's just say, a fraction of the cost. And there's like, works good enough for us. Moving along. Like this, they are nothing but henchmen who just will take any type of payment that they can get. And they are incentivized, you said, to also close cases as fast as possible. So if you don't have legal counsel, if you're one of these people that they're going to pick on, it is probably in your best interest to take a chapter out of Premier Moe's book and just stretch it out as long as you can. Make their life really hard in terms of just, oh, I forgot. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I missed that detail there. Yeah. I'll resend you this, or whatever you can do to delay the process and make it really hard on them. They'll just eventually just move on.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I'm just like, we talk about the CRA enough on this podcast that my books are immaculate. Yeah. Like everything is digitized. Every decimal's in the right spot. I was like, I am not risking it.
I hear you, brother.
Everything is perfect. So, and we have it for all the years going back. So got that all on a Google Drive so that it can't disappear either. Yeah. It's like, you want 6 years ago, we got it. You want 10 years ago, we got it.
We got it all. Yeah. And because we knew we were going to be talking about this quite a bit, we made sure that we were making sure everything was tip-top shape over here in case they come calling, because we're definitely bringing attention to ourselves on this one.
Yeah.
So, but hey, let's move on to this new capital gains tax increase. So we talked about on the show quickly that this is going to affect the people that we actually need: doctors, medical staff, other professionals. And doctors are starting to come out about it and be like, yeah, we're not having it. And what are you hearing right now? I know you are close connections to the community. What do you hear kind of rumblings that are going on over there at the moment?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, because I'm in the healthcare system, a lot of my friends are medical professionals, right? And so there's been murmurings of people saying, I don't know if it's worth it to be a family doctor anymore. It certainly wasn't worth it before, but now this is making it a lot more not worth it, because my entire retirement is tied up in my own personal corporation that I've set up. And I don't want to start losing my retirement to taxation. And they're just like, is it worth it? Do I continue? And it was interesting because my family doc that I lost, who was an amazing doctor, she was like the best doctor I've had, and beloved in the community, just an excellent individual, went the extra mile. And she was just like, I can't take it anymore. I can't take being a family doctor in this system any longer. Quit, closed her practice, shut it all down. She still had like a good, probably 20 more years of family medicine practice, and just was like, nope, we're done, quit. And she was like, I'll go do some stuff either virtually, or maybe work at one of the hospitals as a staffer, or do something out of the States. I'll go do whatever, because I have that mobility. And that's what I'm hearing again from family doctors now, the people who were claiming that we need the most. And so that to me is what's the most concerning.
Absolutely. And that conversation is continuing, because essentially what's the issue that's being brought up is the fact that doctors are voicing, we were told to build corporations around our practices. We were told by the government to do that in order to be able to have our retirement, because we don't get our retirement in the typical way that a normal employee would. And so we did that. And now they're coming back to us saying, no, we're actually going to tax you higher on your retirement, essentially. And there was a conversation, a quick interview here at CTV, on CTV News, that had with a doctor representative here.
Oh, she's the head of the CMA.
Got it.
The Canadian Medical Association.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
This was a very interesting conversation. We'll play about 90 seconds of it, but listen to the questions and listen to the answers.
So you heard the Prime Minister there. He's pretty unequivocal about the reason why they brought this in. They view it as a question of fairness, taking a little bit more from the quote unquote wealthy and making sure younger generations kind of get their fair share. How do you respond to that?
Well, I would certainly say that doesn't feel very fair to me as a family physician working in Canada. I definitely don't consider myself an ultra wealthy person, but as I look across the country, at the professional corporations that were set up, and it varies from province to province, but 15 to 20 years ago, we were encouraged to set up professional corporations as a saving vehicle for our retirement and to run our practices in lieu of increased fees at the time. So here we are now, 15 to 20 years down the line, being told that those legitimate business practices, those established savings vehicles, are going to be taxed at a much higher rate without that threshold afforded to individuals.
Is that at the heart of the concern from doctors, essentially that so many of them did, as you mentioned years ago, take the advice and incorporate, and now they'll be subject to the changes regardless of the threshold as it applies to individuals?
So I think that's part of the challenge. The other part is how do we recruit people to come in and set up practices? How to recruit new graduates and new to Canada physicians to come and set up in a way that meets the needs of Canadians. So for myself, I always try to relate to people that my income into the corporation doesn't equal wealth. Out of that income that comes in, I provide the infrastructure of my office, I provide staff, the computer equipment, supplies that I need to run my office. And that's infrastructure that we're providing to support the healthcare system across Canada. And this is a new tax changes that are a huge disincentive for us to bring in new recruits. And of course, it is completely unfair, late in the game taxation for those physicians who did follow the rules of the day and save for their retirement inside of our professional corporations.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's the thing, right? And she said it right there. How are we supposed to recruit people when those people who are foreign trained, who will have the credentials to practice in Canada, will also have the credentials to practice in the States, go, why am I going to exist in this system and make less money and then get taxed more on that less money when I can go to the States, make more money and have less tax? It's a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. Like, you would have to be really in love with Canada in order to make that decision.
And let's be honest, no one who really loves Canada is going to be the ones who are going to be staying. We're going to be getting the people that just tolerate being here. So you're not going to be getting the best. You're going to be getting people who are frustrated, annoyed, impatient, and just doing this because they have to. And that's not what's good for our medical situation here in the country.
No, it's disappointing, honestly. And especially when you see how hard some of the provinces are working, especially this province, working so hard to create new and innovative ways to bring talent to the province. To have this happen would be a slap in the face. Like, I could see like Houston's office just being like, God damn it. Like, thanks, Trudeau. Right. Like, you know what I mean? Because they work so hard to try and make things better for doctors and to try and make Nova Scotia healthcare system more attractive. For this to come down the pipeline, that must have been a bad day in that office is all I can say.
True. That's a great point. And I'll be curious to see where this goes. The only thing I really hate is the rhetoric that's been painted around this. And it was said at the beginning of this interview where we're making this fair. We're going after the wealthy people. And I see opinion pieces like this coming out of the Star saying billionaires don't like Ottawa's capital gains tax hike, but you should. It's an overdue step toward making our tax system fair. But you're going after the wrong people. And these people do not get it. And that's what I learned when we were in Ottawa, is we have people at the helm that are legitimately don't know what they're doing. They thought this was a good idea. Some staffer brought this up and like, yeah, let's try this. Let's do this. This will make us look good. And they're just crippling our economy more and more and more. So that's how it goes.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like, I think I've kind of waffled a little bit in my own understandings of like the whole like tax the wealthy, redistribute, kind of the Robin Hood mentality that we've always grown up with, take from the rich to give to the poor kind of thing. And I think that just as I've gotten older and maybe a little more wiser, I really don't think you can tax your way to prosperity. I don't believe that that's the way you do it.
It's never worked.
No. So
never worked. It's been tried many, many times. And this is the issue with socialism, communism in general, where it's been tried so many times. And the reason why it fails and the reason why it keeps being retried is the arrogance of people saying, but they didn't do it like we did. And then we're going to try this again. That's typically what's happened over millennia. And unfortunately, just cause people suffer.
Yeah. And like, that's not to say that I'm like all out for unfettered capitalism.
No,
like
absolutely
that's
not.
not what I'm here for either. Because I know I had this conversation with another person. They're like, "Yeah, and I bet you want to privatize healthcare too." And I was like, "Absolutely not." Like, there's a reason why we have public systems in place and safeguards, but I think that we've gone too far in some respects, and I think that we've, in our aim to make everything equal for everyone everywhere, I think that we've created disincentives and made things worse. I think we need to pull back a bit on some of these things and re-incentivize people to do for themselves. I think that there's so much value in people being, like less taxation so they can determine for themselves what they do with their money and how they spend it and how they invest it and how they build their own prosperity. Because I think that even if you had the money to just give everybody money, I don't think that they'd use it well, because I think that when you look at people who win the lottery and then are broke within the next year, I think that there's time and there's learning and that there's real value to earning for yourself.
That's comes back down. There's balance, and we just don't have that balance right now.
No,
simply put. But people are trying to take it into their own hands quickly. This week, it's going down. They're yelling timber out here. They're saying, we're done with Loblaws for the month of May. The boycott has started May 1st, this Wednesday, tomorrow. People are really fired about this one. And Loblaws are just like, the sales indicate, the price changes have indicated that they've taken notice this is happening. And we'll see where this goes. Will people hold to it? Or is this going to be just a lot of lip service? We'll see.
I don't know. The boycott happened for your boy a couple of weeks ago.
True.
I got the date wrong, and I was like, you know what? I'm sticking with it. I don't care. It's funny because one of the reasons being too is that when my wife was pregnant, she needed prenatal vitamins, and Sobeys was actually a pharmacy that offered free prenatal vitamins to all Nova Scotians. I thought that was an awesome program, and I was like, you know what? In this boycott situation, like, you deserve my patronage. And then also one of the things that came out on social media here locally was they actually put out a list of local vendors that you could actually go get your food from. And I think what really surprised me and what I really liked about it was just the way they did it, where they said, if you can afford to support, like, no judgment if you can't, because we live in a very, very tough economy right now. So if you can support, here's the places you can do it. And I thought that was like the best way to handle that. And it puts the information out there without the judgment.
Mm-hmm. And the people are having an issue with is like, it's almost the issue the boycott people have is that it's almost an unfair treatment. Like, why are we specifically going after Loblaws? Like, what about Sobeys? Mm-hmm. Like, what about some of these bigger partners or bigger stores? And I think I get it. I just think Galen Weston just found himself in the middle of it, and he's just getting the ire of everybody. But
I'll tell you why Loblaws for me personally. So one, the Sobeys, like, free medication. I thought that was excellent. Mm-hmm. Two, walking into a Loblaws and being met with security, sometimes police officers, then big plexiglass, like, things to try and keep you away from certain areas because they're worried that you're going to steal. And then you now have that person in the self-checkout that's like trying to take your receipt from you and is like looking up and down to make sure that there's nothing in your... I hate it. I hate walking into a place and feeling like a criminal. Mm-hmm. So I'm just like, nope.
Yeah,
I'm going to boycott it, one, for just my own sanity, so I don't have to feel like I'm on edge at a grocery store.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, I'm over it. Well, we'll leave that one there. We're excited for our next segment here. Let's get right on into it. All right, so we're excited for this next one. Well, you may have seen our TikToks, would have been last week or so, and there's been times we try not to get into the habit of just kind of going off of things we kind of see in passing on TikTok or social media at times and talking about it as a topic.
What are you saying, Josh?
We did it last week. Whoopsie. And that happened, and it's all good. We kind of touched on a topic that was happening here in Nova Scotia, happening here in Halifax, where people are trying to build on land out here, and the government, the city council, provincial government, whatever you want to say, saying, well, the land is just not big enough. The small house that you want to build is a little too big. This, that, the other. It's 16 feet, a little too far to the left. Maybe 3 feet too high, whatever have you, whatever BS that comes out. This is the conversation that's happening. And this happened to a couple right here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. and we have them here with us. So excited to have Josh and his wife, Mandy, with us to kind of talk about what's happening, what is going on, and what has happened, what led up to your initial tech talk that got 80,000 views, and as well, what has happened since.
Our landlord is selling our house, and based on the price he's selling the home, it's $850,000. I speculated that our rent is not going to cover the mortgage. So being a father to 2 kids, I am thinking in my head, I need a plan B. And my father owns a piece of land out on Lakeview Road in Lower Sackville. And he said, you can build on this land if need be, to have a plan B. So I started looking into it, and there was kind of 2 options that we could go. We could go with the backyard suite option, or we could try to subdivide the land, and then we would own the land, then we could build on it, essentially. So whichever way we wanted to go. So we started looking at mini homes, and what we found was basically the smallest you can get is between 1,000 to 1,100 square feet for a 3-bedroom. We're a family of 4. We have a boy and a girl. We need a 3-bedroom house. Mm-hmm. And an 1,184 square feet mini home is really what we picked out. And mind you, the price of this was affordable. It's $240,000.
Particularly not having to buy the land.
Right. That as well, because land is absolutely absurd. So we looked in the backyard suite option, and they only allowed for up to 968 square feet. And in my head, I'm thinking, how does this help families whatsoever? They're talking about a housing crisis. Here's a family that's trying to make roots here and stay here, but they only allow up to 968 square feet. And with such little land on the market, we asked for an exemption. We went to city planners, and we sent them an email, and they said, yeah, we'll have a meeting about it. And a couple days later, they said, yeah, no exemptions. And, that was super frustrating. Here they're talking about a housing crisis, and we get a no exemptions. So we look at subdividing the land, and essentially for that district, you need 40,000 square feet of space. And the reasoning is for city sewer, right? You have to have a septic tank because they don't have city sewer services. If you have city sewer and city water, then you can have a minimum square footage of 10,000 square feet. The lot is currently 26,000 square feet. So if we had city sewer, it would essentially be okay. But what I proposed to council was I said, why can't we just share a septic system? It's my parents' house. You approved in the bylaws for the backyard suite to share a septic system. So why is this not an option? And, it just gets shot down. There's just no option to build a house, right? It doesn't matter what we do or which way we turned. Everyone was just shooting the idea down. And it's not because it wouldn't work, right? I mean, if you asked an engineer to go out there and look and say, hey, could I attach this mini home to the septic system and put it on that lot? And if they said no, okay, so be it. But the fact that the bylaws are written such that they will say no instead of saying, you know what, let's look at it. Let's see if this can be done and we can build a house. That's an issue. So it's not really based on logic. The specifications don't help families. Clearly, it's basically just built for one person. 968 square feet is not a lot of space. It's just disappointing for them to talk about a housing crisis and have all these rules in place and there's no exceptions. But, on the flip side of talking about no exceptions, you look at developments going on in Halifax right now. You look at the Strawberry Hill development. That got all unanimously voted yes by council. And now you look at Bank Group going out in Prospect. They're likely going to get a yes to change zoning laws or what have you to build, 5,000 new units out there. But if you're the small guy, and you're trying to build, a little mini home for your family, or we're not even trying to build it, we're just trying to put it on the lot, then, you get a no. And this lot is perfect. It's flat, which you need for a mini home, right? It's got a decent square footage. If it had city sewer, it would meet the minimum lot size. But again, we weren't even asking for a new septic system. We were just saying, could we share? And there's no possibility to even look. Yeah. They're not willing to hear you out.
Is there any potential for you to I know that we were actually looking at putting a secondary suite on our property, and that was kind of one of the big things was they were like, oh, well, your sewer isn't big enough, your septic system, your septic tank. is there a possibility that they would even entertain the idea of like upgrading the septic tank to support more users?
I think they were talking about doing that in that neighborhood, actually.
Yeah. I was talking to Lisa Blackburn about it, and Lisa Blackburn said that, I guess in the next budget, what have you, they're bringing city sewer or septic or whatever you want to call it, out to the Fall River area, you know, which is a good thing because it'll allow more density. But in the meantime, you know, we're looking at, you know, potentially sharing, what have you, even if we had to empty it more frequently for a couple of years while they do this, you know, that's a simple solution that can be done. But no, we asked that question and it was immediately, you know, look at the bylaws and no, you can't do it.
Like, it wasn't even a matter of getting a private company out to survey it themselves or anything. Like, we couldn't even get the approval for the surveying. It was like nothing. And they tried to throw everything at us. Like, they tried to tell us that the property was too close to the highway and that DOT would get on us for building, even though we'd be building on the other side of the house from the highway.
Oh yeah, that was another issue too. So because the lot is right beside the highway, DOT claims it as part of a buffer zone, even though the land is technically owned by...
It's grandfathered in from the house, so it's not like they're ever going to tear down his parents' house to build.
Yeah, so there's just so many regulations to building right now. It's utterly ridiculous. And, you know, again, they claim we're in a housing crisis, but, you know, they have all these laws written up in such a neat little bow that you can't untie it.
Yeah.
And most of these bylaws existed like longer than I've been alive, and any of them that have been amended haven't been amended since before COVID. So they're prehistoric.
For sure. And what I've gathered too from even our conversations and research over the past year and a half about a lot of these issues is it just seems like, we talked about it before the show, where it's very developer friendly. We've been finding that there's been a lot of focus on density, apartments, condos, what have you. And there's not a whole lot of encouragement for a single family home ownership. And that seems like this falls underneath that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. They, you know, essentially we're going to get forced into renting. And we know that part of developing wealth is owning a home. And, you know, we as a family are trying to do that. You know, we don't want to pay rent forever. We want to own a home. And this was an affordable solution to do that. And, you know, I'm not even saying that it had to be done. I just wanted the option of having someone come out and looking at it and saying, hey, is this possible? And if it's possible, let's do it. But the bylaws don't allow that. The bylaws would rather, you know, they would rather use the bylaws to tell you no, rather than have the bylaws set up to tell you, you know what, maybe it's possible. Let's look into it. If it's possible, let's do it. Let's get you a house. Let's get you protected from a rent eviction.
I can't imagine we're the only family even going through this, even if we're the ones getting the most attention right now. Like, there's got to be a whole other group of people just struggling for the same thing that we're fighting for. Even if you talk to some of the people who were doing interviews from the tent city that came up in Sackville, a lot of them are dual income families, like making normal wages at normal jobs with kids. And the solution for the government during that particular instance was to take the children away from their families rather than try to help them provide affordable housing. Like, that seems absurd to me. And all of this land that's government owned is all catered to those people that are going to put up those giant high rises and those giant, you know, complexes, rather than the people that just probably want to buy like a fair share of land. Even the size of your parents' land was nowhere near the size we needed. Like 1184 square feet mini home on 20,000
You're good. 26,000 square feet.
That one. Woo! 26,000 square feet. We don't need all that space, you know? So, like, I don't see why it's so hard to just auction off government-owned land to people who need it. Like, genuinely need it.
And one of the things that I think I get most frustrated by is that when you see some of these people who are actively fighting against that kind of ideology, they're usually older, well off, well established. They benefited from the system at that point in time, and now they're like, we don't want this to change. And it's like, you're killing the next generation.
Yeah, you want to tell me how I can build my house, but then go home to your cushy little subdivision with your 5-figure, 6-figure paycheck, and then try to decide what's right for a family in normal middle-class society.
It's almost not fair. I mean, these grandfathered rules of, I mean, we're supposed to have equal rights as a society, but essentially if you are 60 years old and bought before these bylaws came into existence, you have more rights than someone who is young and doesn't own any land.
Even if you bought before COVID, I owned a house before this all started, and putting aside, the story about how I don't have it anymore, buying, owning, and selling property between 2019 and even like 2021, not even the same world.
Fever dream.
Oh my God, not even the same world. It's insane.
It is insane. And I mean, we've looked at potentially buying the land to put the mini home on. But I mean, we kind of are up against the clock in a sense, right? Because he is still selling the home. Luckily, the first offer that went through, we had an offer on like the first week, but it fell through. So, we have some time for now, but it's like, at what point, if it sells, are we screwed? And it's like, at what point does council start to care? Clearly, there's already been families out on the street, and they just don't care. They'd rather take the kids away from the families.
Right. So that's what I'm understanding right now is you're facing this issue of this is all depending on time of when the house you're currently renting out will be sold. Yeah. You will then likely be forced out in the street, and you'll have to find different options.
Well, it scares us because the house that we're in, it's a quadplex, and the price that he is selling it for in order to make the mortgage payments on that unit, I know how much me and my neighbors are all spending on rent, and there's no conceivable way that they're going to make a profit. Even with the 5% rent cap you can do per year to raise rents, it's going to take them 3-4 years to even start breaking even. So the solution to most of these buyers is either going to be to rent, evict, and start from scratch, or to move their own families into this place.
Gee.
And that's what we've been seeing with a lot of the viewings. It's either people interested in moving in their families or people who want to clean slate the whole place.
It's also like, I mean, we also had issues with our landlord as well. I mean, he is, yes, a good landlord, but we signed the lease, how long ago? 2 years ago now? And we didn't...
March of 2021.
Yeah, so we're on a month-to-month right now. So that's what makes this even worse. That is, if it sells, we are completely screwed.
We have 3 months max. That's the allotment for, unless we dispute it. If there's an eviction, it's 3 months.
Essentially, yeah.
So we can drag it out, bureaucracy, blah, 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 blah. But like, it's going to buy us a little bit of time, maybe.
Yeah. And so, yeah, as you said, you're up against the clock, and the bylaws are just, not really bending in any way, shape, or form for you. And so where does that leave you now? Obviously, you've put out videos on TikTok. You've gone on CBC, or about to go on CBC to tell your story. You're here now. Is this kind of the strategy of just to try and get your voice as loud as possible, put some pressure to make something happen here?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, election is coming up for council, right? It's coming up in the fall. And we need new voices in council, clearly. We need voices who support everyone, not just the little guy. We need a council who is going to realize that the bylaws are not working and we need change. And, I don't know all the answers, but I know for sure that they need to change. So our strategy is kind of just keep putting the message out and kind of get the story out. And, there's obviously other people in the same situation. We're not the only one, and I know that. But if I can get the message out, and maybe our story resonates with someone else and it gets heard, maybe now they feel like they have a voice. Now they speak up. Maybe another person speaks up. And this starts to snowball into where there's actually change that goes into effect.
Shame changes the game. So just shame them and shame them and shame them.
More or less.
Yeah.
But what's funny is that I actually, when I was volunteering on a board that was attached to council, attached to planning and development, one of the things that one of the councillors said to me, he said, if you have a group of 20 people who are loud, well-informed, and well-connected, he's like, you can change anything you want in the city. So it was kind of almost like a hopeful message in that way. So I think that you're doing the right thing here by trying to get your message out, because I really do believe that that's true, that you can get a small group of committed, very vocal citizens together to change something, that it can change.
Well, that's why I appreciate people like you guys who actually have the platform in the local circles that can get these messages even farther, because that's what it actually takes to make the difference. We're just two people, but it takes a village.
Totally.
Yeah, 100%. We've been on a few shows now. We've been on like News 95.7 on the radio. We've been on CBC.
I think you're Todd Vino's number one broadcaster. I think you need to get cut into the payroll at this point.
He's tired of me by this point.
Yeah, this is the guy, Todd. This is the guy you talk to once a week.
He does not like me at this point. He's heard enough of my shit.
I don't think Todd Vino really likes anybody, but it's all good.
But he hates the people you hate more than he hates you, so it's perfect.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly.
Yeah, more or less. I also kind of wanted to touch on council there with what you said. We just got a letter from I think it was our who was it?
Paul Russell.
Paul Russell. Yeah. So I messaged him. And I talked to him about our situation. And I think, is he an MLA or is he a counselor? I think he's a counselor for HRM.
I can't remember. He's a hypocrite is what he is.
Yeah, he is. Absolutely he is. See, he sent us a brochure in the mail saying, talking about homelessness and,
oh my God,
what is a homeless person and how everything he is doing to help the homelessness crisis. But when I sent him an email, he replied very snarkily and, about the bylaws. And he said, clearly, in large bold letters, the bylaw states, blah, 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 you cannot build. I can't foresee this happening.
It was like sucks to suck.
Right after we got that brochure. It's just the most ironic thing, getting that brochure as you're getting an email from him, basically giving you the middle finger saying, you're not going to build a house here. It sucks to suck.
Yeah. Well, it kind of takes me back to what our guest last week, Dalton, said, is no one in politics can say they care about housing and just keep thinking these bylaws make sense and stand by them the way they have, as if it's the word of God. Oh my God. So it's pretty wild.
It's because they can sit in their little fancy subdivisions in their little fishbowl and watch us like Big Brother. And it's almost like a game of, who's getting kicked out next.
If you look at the national level too, they have written into law the National Housing Strategy, which says that housing is a right and that they have to make policy change that is effective and is reasonable to provide housing. So I put this in every email, and we've emailed Tim Houston, John Lohr. We've emailed every councillor pretty well near all city planners. And not one of them has responded to that part of the email in which I said, if you look at that national law, it is national law that you need to make reasonable policy changes to make sure that housing is provided. Not one of them wrote back about that. Not a single one. So, that just tells me that they do not care whatsoever.
Wanted to be excluded from that narrative.
Well, it's not their department. That's the federal government. So
right?
I know it's municipal, but
no, that's not what I mean. I'm saying it's like the equivalent of like going and finding that person in Canadian Tire, and they're like, oh, actually, I don't work in seasonal. You have
to go to automotive.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I guess my last thing I'll put out is, what is your final parting message? You want to make sure it drives the point home of what you want to see done and what you want, the message you want to get across here.
I want a house.
I want them to change the bylaws to make them more reasonable. And I want them to look at the bylaws and I want them to realize that, hey, these are a big issue that is preventing us from normal working-day people having homes.
Right.
Yep.
And not just having homes that are affordable. Like, again, you look at what condos are costing or whatever, $2,500 a month. I could have had this house, this little mini home, for a mortgage of about $1,200. And you think about the change, that's really positive for society to have the price come down that much. It has
to be like a case-by-case basis.
But
if it's that hard to write into bylaws specific terms for every single person, make it case-by-case. Let people apply. Let people tell their stories. Let people show you what they're working with. It's really not that hard. You go to get a mortgage at a bank and they make you tell them their whole life story. Like, you got to sell your soul to get a mortgage.
True.
You got to go through every single nook and cranny of every tax form you've ever filed since the womb. I'm sure that you can have a process by which people can apply for these on a need-to-need basis, and more people can get approved.
Yeah.
And they need exemptions too, clearly. And they need bylaws that allow things to be looked at in a reasonable manner and not just, it doesn't mean this specific requirement. No, can't happen. Look at each situation separately and find out if it's possible. And if it's possible, go ahead, build it. We shouldn't dictate whether you can own a home or not based on some.
Well, especially on land you already own. Like, we're not asking for brand new land here. It's our land. We can put a 10-foot castle on it if we want to, in theory, but apparently not.
Well, not according to council.
No.
Yep. It's interesting because I saw recently come across TikTok, actually. They were doing a comparison of bylaws, the book of bylaws from 2020, from 2000, and then the book of bylaws that came out in 2020, and it was like double in size.
Oh,
it's like, why? Why do we need that? Why are we putting so much regulation and red tape on things? And I gave this example last week, but the idea of when I was sitting in that community design advisory committee, and they were arguing about whether or not a shutter, like the half-inch shutter on a house, would completely destroy the fabric of the community. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, these are the things that are being argued about. And it's just like, you're losing the plot here. These are homes. These are ways for people to build generational wealth, like you said. And these are things that are going to actually pull people out of systems that are completely designed against them. And so if you're not actively acting in service of that, then what are you doing?
They're putting shipping containers in a baseball field. Don't worry.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
Exactly.
Big steps.
Does that go by, like, does that follow the bylaws? Of course, I have questions about that.
Right?
I don't know. The zoning is very unclear with all of that. I don't know about that.
Tell them you're going to put your mini home on, the
On the
baseball
baseball
diamond.
field?
Yeah. We're just moving it in there with the rest of the neighbors.
We'll have like the Playboy mansion of shipping containers while everybody else gets normal ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Well, we really appreciate y'all coming on and telling your story. I think it really does mean a lot. I think it's really helpful for our listeners, but as well as people who will see this in passing on social media. We will be clipping this up. We will be amplifying it and trying to just let people know this is what's going on. This is real world situations that are happening. Red tape is real. Issues with bylaws are real in every municipality across the country. And this is just not a federal issue. It's not just a provincial issue. This is all levels of government that need to figure this out because people are hurting and people are going to be put out because of this, honestly, stupidity of laws that were written 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago. So we really appreciate you guys coming on. And I think I'm going to do this. We're going to forego a wild card segment tonight and we're going to end it right here. So whatever it is you're doing, whether you be watching the Leafs lose,
trying to build a house.
Wow. He hit that. We're going to try that one more time. Whatever you be doing, whether you be watching the Leafs lose,
trying to build a house,
or simply just flip that back to me, sir.
I thought you were going to let them.
Dude, they don't know what we're doing here. We love you all so much. Whatever it is, we love you. Peace out.
Thanks, guys.